All right, let's dive right into a question that honestly hangs over this entire century. It's the provocative title of Kishore Mahbubani's book, Has China Won? Now, that's the kind of question that gets whispered in the halls of power, but not many people are brave enough to ask it out loud. So, what's the big idea here? Well, at its core, the book's premise is both really simple and absolutely massive. A huge geopolitical contest between the United States and China isn't on the horizon. It's already happening. And this rivalry is pretty much set to define our world. And this brings us to the real kicker, the central point of the book. Mahabani argues that America has kind of stumbled into this high-stakes competition. It's like walking into the World Cup final without a game plan. They're on the field, but is there a clear, comprehensive strategy to actually win? So, here's how we're going to break all this down. First, we're going to dig into this idea of a contest without a strategy. Then, we'll look at the biggest mistakes both sides have made. Yep, America's and China's. After that, we'll zoom way out for a 2,000-year perspective, which is kind of mind-blowing. And we'll wrap it all up by asking that huge final question. Is this conflict inevitable, or can it still be avoided? Okay, first up, the central problem. The idea that America has walked onto the field for maybe the biggest geopolitical game in its entire history without a playbook. And that subtitle you see, one side is playing chess, the other is playing Weiqi. That's a really crucial metaphor we need to understand. What's so fascinating is when you put it side by side with the Cold War. Back then, America had a master plan. They had a strategic genius in George Kennan, who wrote the famous Long Telegram that basically laid out the entire doctrine of containment. But with China, there's no Kennan. There's no grand plan. I mean, get this. As recently as 2019, the official line from the State Department was that they were still trying to work it out. A world of difference. This gets us back to those two different games. Henry Kissinger pointed this out. American strategy often feels like chess. It's direct, it's aggressive, and the goal is to get a quick, decisive victory. Checkmate. Chinese strategy, though, is much more like the game of Weiqi, or Go. It's not about one knockout blow. It's about patience. It's about slowly surrounding your opponent, building up small advantages over decades until the whole board has shifted in your favor. Two totally different ways of thinking. So this short-term chess player mindset has led America to make what Mahbubani argues is its single biggest mistake, and that is systematically undermining its own greatest sources of power. For generations, America's true superpower wasn't just its military. It was its massive network of global alliances. But in recent years, the US has been alienating those very friends, pulling out of huge trade deals like the TPP, slapping tariffs on allies, weaponizing the dollar. Every one of these moves has isolated the US a little more. And you have to ask, who does that benefit? It's an unintentional gift to China. This behavior has gotten so noticeable that even staunchly pro-American voices are sounding the alarm. I mean, look at this quote from Martin Wolf of the Financial Times, calling America a rogue superpower. That's a stunning statement. It means the world is starting to lose trust in the US as a predictable, reliable partner. And this erosion of trust is so dangerous because it threatens America's single greatest strategic asset, its ace in the hole, the US dollar's role as the world's reserve currency. This, Mahabani says, is America's true Achilles heel. So how exactly does this play out? Well, it's a chain reaction. First, the US uses the dollar's power to enforce sanctions. Now, its own allies, like the UK, France, and Germany, they have to comply, even if they disagree, or they risk getting cut off from the whole financial system. So what's the logical next step for them? Well, to protect their own sovereignty, they start creating alternative payment systems to get around American control. So by using its greatest weapon, America is actually teaching the rest of the world how to make that weapon less effective. But hey, this is not a one-sided story. China has made a colossal strategic mistake of its own by alienating what used to be its most powerful asset right inside the United States. And what was that asset? The American business community. As Professor Susan Shirk points out here, when the relationship really started to sour, a powerful group that always used to defend China, American big business, was suddenly and completely silent. And their silence is just shocking when you look at the numbers. For decades, companies like Boeing and General Motors made staggering profits in China. I mean, look at GM. China was nearly half of its entire global market. For these corporations, China wasn't just another market, it was a lifeline. And for years, they were China's most powerful advocates in Washington. So why'd they go quiet?
To put it simply, their patience just ran out. According to the American Chamber of Commerce, years and years of broken promises finally took their toll. They got tired of intellectual property theft, of being forced to transfer technology, and of trying to compete on a playing field that was deliberately tilted to favor Chinese companies. Okay, now to really grasp the scale of what's happening, we need to stop thinking in years or even decades. We need to zoom way, way out and take a 2,000-year view of history. This chart right here might be the most important one in the whole book because it shows something profound. For 1,800 of the last 2,000 years, the world's economic center of gravity was in Asia, with China and India as the biggest players. You know, the last 200 years of Western dominance? That wasn't the norm. That was the historical aberration. So what we're seeing now isn't some crazy new development. It's actually a powerful return to the historical norm. And as the status shows, that return has already happened. If you measure it by purchasing power parity, what people can actually buy, China's economy is already bigger than the US economy. The great rebalancing is well underway. All of this leads us to the book's final and really paradoxical conclusion about the future. It's a conclusion that seems to point in two completely opposite directions at the same time. On one hand, the rivalry feels inevitable. It's just the psychology of great power politics, that zero-sum thinking, the idea that for one side to gain, the other must lose. It just naturally pushes both nations towards a confrontation. And yet, Mahbubani argues a direct conflict is also completely avoidable. Why? Because when you really look past all the rhetoric and you focus on the core national interests of both countries, they actually align on the biggest global issues, keeping the sea lanes open, maintaining a stable world economy, and fighting climate change. And so, we're left with the ultimate question. The future of this relationship, and really the whole world, hinges on this choice. Will cool, rational self-interest win out, or is the emotional pull of a great power rivalry just too strong to resist? The answer, whatever it is going to define our century.